Thank you for standing by and welcome to the Avecho Biotechnology Entitlement Offer webinar and Q&A. All participants are in a listen-only mode. There will be an initial slide presentation lasting for approximately 30 to 40 minutes, followed by Q&A based on questions received via email and any that come through live. If you do have a question you'd like to submit live, please feel free to type it in using the Q&A function within Zoom. Appearing on behalf of Avecho today, we have the CEO, Dr. Paul Gavin. Paul, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join. So as mentioned, my name is Dr. Paul Gavin. I am the Chief Executive Officer at Avecho Biotechnology. As you are all aware, sort of after 3 years in development, the company has completed its preparations for our first pivotal phase 3 clinical trial, and this will be testing the efficacy of our proprietary CBD capsule in an insomnia indication. Now, the study is currently the largest planned in Australia, and it will test, a whole range of parameters around sleep. But with its size comes a relatively high price tag, which is the reason for the entitlement issue that was announced yesterday. So with that, I intend to walk you through the presentation that accompanied the prospectus to the market and answer any questions that you may have about the program or the entitlement offer itself. So there's our disclaimer. So I'm starting again with this fast facts slide. So we have been developing these pharmaceutical cannabinoid products using our TPM. The intention has been with our TPM always to increase the absorption of these products to give them some commercial differentiation compared to what is essentially already a commodity around the world in the various markets. The first product that we've been building is this 75 milligram CBD capsule, which we completed with Catalent in 2021. We've already passed through our human studies characterizing its absorption, which we did in Australia in December 21. And our pivotal phase 3 clinical trial is now ready to go. So you might have heard me mention it a couple of times. We spent the entirety of last year developing this protocol, which we'll talk a bit about later. And we have formal ethics approval for it received in December. So the trial itself is ready to push the button on. We are targeting this over-the-counter registration in Australia, and I'll talk a bit about that because that is a poorly understood piece of the puzzle. We already have licenses for the CBD capsule overseas as well as TPM in some of the other markets. And you would have seen recently, late last year, early this year, we have some pharmaceutical arrangements for some of the non-cannabis programs, which we also hope will turn into winners for the company. So right now, we have one thing on our mind, and that is essentially this phase 3 clinical trial. We have never been this focused. This is the big carrot dangling in front of us, and our goal is 100% to complete this pivotal phase 3 trial using the proprietary CBD capsule. So doing this will allow a subsequently regulatory submission. It's really the last bit of information we need to push the button on a TGA submission and lead to bigger ticket licensing deals. So it is of prime importance for the company. In progressing that product, we will create opportunities to license this product and other TPM cannabinoid dosage forms to third parties for different clinical indications, different geographies, or different markets. And so before I get onto the product itself, again, just a reminder of why cannabinoids are such a good fit for Avecho and our TPM technology. So many countries around the world have enacted legislation permitting the use of cannabis extracts for medicinal purposes. Others have also got consumer recs. I think it's about 30 countries around the world now have some form of cannabis market, but it has been illegal for a long time. And so everyone's had a race to get the product to market in sort of early dosage forms, which are essentially oils. And so a lot of sort of R&D that would normally occur into pharmaceutical dosage forms and normal pharmaceutical development hasn't taken place. And so we are very bullish, and everyone agrees in the space that moving forward, a range of more acceptable pharmaceutical dosage forms are going to be required to fulfill the needs of patients, physicians, and consumers. However, the cannabinoids themselves are really difficult molecules to formulate. So they are oils, they're oil soluble, which means like most other oils, they have very poor oral absorption. So depending on the research you read, you'll see different numbers. If you look at the Epidiolex, which is the only FDA approved CBD product, that talks about a 6% bioavailability. So only 6% of what you actually eat is ever absorbed to enter systemic circulation to add any kind of therapeutic value. So you're wasting over 90% of the drug. And this presents real challenges for developing formulations that can deliver the cannabinoids to the body efficiently. Now, if you can increase the absorption, then you can lead to greater therapeutic effect because you've got more circulating CBD in the blood to actually exert some kind of benefit. You can look at new indications that need quite high doses that would be untreatable using products with really low absorption. You can save patients money. So right now, if they're paying for 90% of drug that is metabolized and never absorbed, it's obviously not a good economic situation. So if you can increase the absorption, they can take less drug and waste less drug. And the piece I sort of touched about at the start is commercial differentiation. So the race to market, whether it's the medicinal, the consumer, the recreational spaces around the world, these crude formulations, they are already commodities. Everyone is essentially selling a flavor of the same product, and there is no commercial differentiation. And so really, I mean, the issues that I've outlined here, there are very few medicinal cannabis companies or recreational cannabis companies that have the expertise to do this, because this is drug development. And we've been biotech for 20 years doing this with other medications. And so this really plays to our strengths. And specifically, this plays to the real strengths of our TPM technology. So most of you as shareholders would know about the tech. You've heard us talk about it a lot. It's ours. We own it. We manufacture it here in Clayton. It's a proprietary phosphorylated form of vitamin E, and it encapsulates drug molecules. So when you put it into a system with water, it forms these nanoparticles. The nanoparticles encapsulate drug, and you can increase drug solubility. You can increase drug stability. You can increase oral bioavailability, and you can increase topical and transdermal absorption. And all four of these are limitations of the cannabis market right now. Now, because it's built from vitamin E, it has an excellent safety profile. And the thing that TPM works best in the world with is lipid-soluble molecules with poor oral bioavailability. So part of the reason we looked at the cannabinoids is they just had the perfect chemistry combined with the deficiencies of the industry that really played to our strengths. And so the overarching theme is always that if we use TPM to reformulate a drug product, we can give improved pharmaceutical performance and properties, as well as commercial opportunities for differentiation, licensing, and patent protection. So really, we began our development on the cannabinoids with a very simple question, which was, can TPM dissolve and encapsulate cannabinoids? And so the image that you're looking at here, we did this work with Puricis in the US. It's essentially looking at cannabidiol, so CBD. That's the vial on the right. As I said, it's very insoluble. The liquid is mostly water. You can see that the CBD is completely insoluble, and it's just living as a solid kind of aggregate. The vial on the left is exactly the same vehicle, mostly water and CBD, but a little bit of TPM. And the TPM forms these nanoparticles. It encapsulates, solubilizes the CBD, and you end up with a homogeneous formulation that you can use for applications. And so whenever we see this kind of profile, I actually don't know if you can see my cursor. When we see this kind of profile with any drug, we are very comfortable based on our experience that it leads to increased oral absorption or increased topical absorption. And so when we saw these results with Puricis, we kind of felt that we really needed to be developing these formulations ourselves, again, using our background and focusing on sort of products for future pharmaceutical registration. And so we began by optimizing oral formulations for increased CBD absorption. So no one else was doing this at the time. There are a few people that have sort of caught up, or not caught up, and then they haven't caught up, but sort of seen the light and understand the issues with bioavailability. And so we were doing this in sort of 2020 when no one else was talking about bioavailability. We were talking about optimizing formulations. So not just trying a formulation and seeing if it works. We optimize things. We alter formulations one variable at a time to increase the absorption. And we started this process in Melbourne, in our labs and in collaboration with Monash. And then we went to Copenhagen in Denmark, where there's some key opinion leaders. And then from there, we went to the US. This graph on the left represents the first bioavailability study that we did. So we had identified in Melbourne a whole bunch of formulation parameters that would increase CBD solubility in the gastric space. We went over to Denmark, continued that work, and then we did our first oral bioavailability studies. What you're looking at here this little red line, that's the absorption in animals, so again, rats, of cannabidiol in MCT. So MCT is just an oil. You can buy it from the pharmacist. It's coconut oil. And essentially CBD and MCT is what 90% of medicinal cannabis products are, or not just CBD, but the other cannabinoids as well. They use MCT as their carrier oil. And you can see the absorption's pretty poor, in line with what Epidiolex is talking about, around sort of 6% absorption. We started tweaking formulation variables. And as you can see, across different formulations, we increased the absorption. We ended up with this formulation here, TPM3, which increased bioavailability in rats by about 40 times. We actually had a couple of additional formulations that had even further increases in absorption, but these ones were unstable, physically unstable. So you could make them in time to dose the animals and the absorption looked really good, but they fell apart over time. So they weren't actually candidates for pharmaceutical products. Recently, just last year, we actually redid some of this experiment in dogs. So a second animal model. Dogs are sort of currently the PK model of choice for cannabidiol, not just because of the absorption, but also because they're a pretty good canary in the cage for any gastric irritation. So CBD has a dose problem that if you give too much of it, it can cause nausea and vomiting and diarrhea. We did this study at the request of some larger pharma companies that wanted to see how our product compared to Epidiolex. So that's this blue line. Epidiolex is the only regulatory approved CBD product on the planet. It's approved for rare childhood epilepsy. And we also use this MCT formulation, which is the one in green. In the dog model, our formulation in the fasted state, so these are fasted dogs, this increased absorption by about 400%. And it increased absorption even further in the fed state. So we had these two models really advocating for the increased absorption of our product. Now, just quickly on the opportunity for a product like ours. So the global cannabis market is already huge. Like we've over our lifetime been working in opioids and other things that have blockbuster markets. They're all tiny markets compared to cannabis already. So as I say, it's in over 30 countries. In 2021, loose valuation about 17.8 billion US, North America being the major market, annual growth of about 25%. And depending again on the research paper you read, in a few years, it's projected to be sort of between 70 and 90 billion US. Again, 70 to 90 billion US for a commodity. Now, in Australia alone, this is a relative conservative figure that we pulled out of a research report. You can see others already saying that it's already at sort of 100 to sort of 200 million bucks already. It's growing very, very rapidly in Australia. The problem with the way it's growing in Australia, it's an unapproved medicine. So this is all going through the special access scheme or authorized prescriber. None of these products are currently on market. Now, this is what, I guess, the product that we all aspire to represent, or replicate, sorry. So this is Epidiolex. This is the one pharmaceutical CBD product on the planet. It was developed by GW Pharma. It's for orphan indications. So it was developed for rare childhood epilepsy conditions. So orphan indications give you a fast track through the FDA. You can do smaller, less clinical trials. Because the pitch is always for a rare condition, there aren't that many patients available, so they can't hold you to doing huge clinical trials because there's just not the patient numbers to do it. The thing about an orphan indication is that it buys you a fast track through the FDA, but once it's approved, you don't have many patients left to prescribe it to. So nevertheless, first CBD product approved, and despite being an orphan indication that's not that regularly prescribed, the company was acquired for $7.2 billion US in 2021 by Jazz Pharma, who are regular big pharma, not medicinal cannabis or cannabis. This was the big first step into cannabis space by big pharma. They acquired it for $7.2 billion for this product. And this is the product that you just saw. We have 400% increase absorption compared to. Now, it's anticipated that registered pharmaceutical CBD products for broader indications would obviously have access to much bigger markets than Epidiolex because, as I say, it's rarely prescribed. So we're targeting indications like insomnia that are huge commercial opportunities. And so this brings me to this Australian piece. It is very rare that as a biotech, you would ever develop a drug product for Australia. It doesn't make commercial sense. The population is too small. If you're going to invest in clinical trials and all the rest, you typically are focused on the FDA and the big ticket wins over there. But what's happened in Australia, for those of you who aren't across it, and this was the very end of, I think, 2020, right when we were doing our formulation development and optimization, was the TGA. The TGA are unhappy about the unregistered medicinal cannabis industry in Australia, because everyone's happy selling their product without doing any of the normal research and drug development to prove that it works, prove that it's safe, give prescribing physicians, instructions on how it should be used. Again, all the normal things of drug development. The mantra essentially has been with medicinal cannabis that we can sell the product without investing in research, so why would we ever invest in research? So that's completely against the philosophy of the TGA. And so what the TGA has done to incentivize us all to do proper drug development is they dangled a big carrot in front of everyone, which was essentially, if you did the work and you registered CBD with the TGA as a pharmaceutical, they would allow it to be registered as an over-the-counter medicine. Now, an over-the-counter medicine in Australia, this will be one of those ones that you can walk into any pharmacy in the country and buy it directly from the chemist behind the counter. So you won't have to go to see a GP, you won't have to get a prescription, which are all additional time and cost. OTC registration is seen as a huge commercial advantage over prescription medicines. So it's a huge opportunity. And when it was announced, everyone in the medicinal cannabis space jumped up with much excitement. And then 5 minutes later, they actually realized how difficult drug development was. And so now there is only a handful of us that are formally pursuing this opportunity. Now, there are obviously caveats with the TGA guidance about what they will accept. And all of these play directly to the strengths of Avecho. So the first is that they will only accept registration of CBD products up to 150 milligram per day dose. Now, 150 milligrams per day is still considered quite a low dose of CBD. And so, there's a high likelihood that trials could fail. But when you have a product with increased absorption, your product acts as a much higher dose. So it's quite possible our 150 milligrams is equivalent to a normal 300 or 450 or whatever it is. So it gives us a better chance of getting efficacy in phase 3. The second piece is that clinical trial design is really hard. Like, it is really, really hard. And there is a complete absence in the world of randomized, placebo-controlled phase 3 CBD studies in insomnia, as an example. So normally you would pull that stuff out of the public domain and you would use their trials that have been published to as starting points to build your own trial. But that doesn't exist. So we are all building these trials ourselves. Fortunately for us, we've been doing clinical trials for 15 years. So I think I've been involved at Avecho in over 30 clinical trials. So we have significant experience in designing in the design and conduct of clinical trials. And the last piece, which is kind of unspoken about, is pharmaceutical stability. So unregistered medicinal cannabis is not obliged to have a 2-year shelf life. And CBD and some of these cannabinoids aren't half as chemically stable as you may be led to believe. With a pharmaceutical product, it has to have, a rock solid 2-year shelf life. And CBD, even in our early work, we saw that if you look at CBD the wrong way, it'll convert to THC, or it'll degrade, or it'll do something else. There are so many different environmental conditions that can make CBD degrade that a 2-year pharmaceutical shelf life can be difficult. We worked on this quite extensively with Catalent. We identified all the problems that were making it degrade and convert. We addressed them in the formulation. And we've got stability ongoing, but the first batches successfully passed through 1.5 years of stability and are well on their way to a 2-year shelf life. Now, just this last piece here. This Australian over-the-counter opportunity is currently unique in the world. We are the only regulatory agency that has allowed this. So a CBD product going through the FDA or the others at the moment would be a prescription medicine, not one of these OTC products. So it's huge. And if you are one of the first people to achieve this pharmaceutical registration, you have direct access to the Australian adult population. And behind Epidiolex, you'll be one of the first pharmaceutical CBD products on the planet. So plenty of opportunities for subsequent licensing. And so look, this is the summary of the product that we've been building over the last 3 years. As touched upon, we optimized the formulation for increased absorption. We've proven that in 2 different animal models. We finalized this pharmaceutical capsule with Catalent in the US, and it's on ongoing stability. It contains 75 milligrams of ultra pure synthetic CBD from Purisis. So again, pharmaceutical industry, we understand synthetic drugs. Botanical pharmaceuticals are rare. And they are rare because everyone understands that synthetic molecules have better CMC, better reproducibility, great stability, and they will fly through a regulatory submission much easier than a botanical origin product would. We've completed the human trials characterizing absorption. We've got the trial ready to go. As I said, we're chasing this OTC approval, but please do not be mistaken. As attractive as the Australian opportunity is, the rest of the world is obviously the biggest opportunity. So we prove it works here, and then we license overseas. And we're about to go into grant with 2 new patents that specifically cover the combination of TPM with cannabinoids with some unique oil ratios. So these are in PCT phase. We have to start actually picking our countries to go into in the next couple of weeks. And so why sleep? Of all the indications that we could have picked on that people are looking at CBD for around the world, it all comes down to this over-the-counter opportunity in Australia. So the other thing about the over-the-counter opportunity is it can only be for clinical indications that are self-diagnosable. So you can diagnose yourself without seeing a GP, and they can't be so severe that it requires medical supervision anyway. And so that really leaves us all picking between, pain, anxiety, insomnia, maybe smoking withdrawal or inflammatory bowel or something like that. We went with insomnia because of a bunch of reasons, and specifically the commercial opportunity is one. So all of these facts here come from a Deloitte's sleep position paper that they commissioned. The 2 gentlemen from the Australian Sleep Foundation that wrote this report are on our clinical trial. So one is the principal investigator, and the other was one of our scientific advisors. Essentially, 40% of Australians aren't sleeping. I'm not. I'm sure half the people I'm talking to here aren't either. 60% of us are experiencing these symptoms 3 to 4 times a week. Only 20% of us are reporting sleeping uninterrupted. Australia alone, despite being a small market, is sort of spending $250 million a year on other medications that give you a hangover the next day. And it's costing the economy sort of $19 billion. Now, we went to the TGA and before we committed to insomnia and said, CBD, insomnia, what do you think? And the TGA came back and said, yes, we confirm that if you did insomnia, that would be an indication that would be registrable as an over-the-counter medicine. And so just quickly, clinical trial design and the difficulty. So while all the opportunity sounds exciting, the dash of really harsh reality, which I have mentioned upon, is the design and the conduct of a pharmaceutical insomnia study is very hard. And you do need a fair degree of clinical experience to kind of get it right. So again, given that there's been an absence globally of randomized placebo-controlled studies that you can use as your template, the main concern has really been what to do about the placebo effect. So placebo effect, for those of you that don't know, is essentially when a patient reports an improvement in their condition, even when you've given them a pretend medication. And this happens all the time. And so trials with subjective endpoints like insomnia have very, very high placebo effect. So essentially, anytime you're asking a person to subjectively tell you how they feel, those are the indications that are really susceptible to high placebo responses. And when people are improving, when they haven't even received the drug, it can make it very difficult to monitor what the drug is doing and what its effect size is. Now, the little screen capture here, I'd sort of been making some grumbling in the industry last year about the placebo effect and how other medicinal cannabis companies didn't understand the risks that they were doing. A journalist overheard me and interviewed me. And so fortunately, I was put on the record in October last year, and you can see this through the CANNABIS website, talking about why the placebo effect is a really, really big problem for these CBD studies, because whether it's anxiety, whether it's pain, whether it's insomnia, we are all essentially going to base our trial upon the question, how are you feeling? And so the placebo effect is damaging. And so as forewarned, I guess, in the last couple of months, if you've been following the space, the first two big medicinal cannabis company phase 3 trials failed in insomnia. And so why did they fail? Again, if you go to CANNABIS and look through some of the interviews and reporting for those two companies, they both said they failed because of the placebo effect, which is what we've really spent the last year designing our way around. And so this is a quick snapshot of our study. So again, our trial, it took a year to develop. It was designed not just with the TGA in mind. It was designed so that the FDA, the FDA would accept this study, the EMEA would accept this study. In order to do that, we built the study based on both the American, the FDA and the European insomnia guidance documents. So there are actually guidance documents on how to conduct a clinical trial for insomnia, which have not factored into the design of some of our peers in the space here. We also interrogated the last two FDA submission packs for the last FDA approved insomnia drugs. We went through their clinical trials and worked out what they did. And essentially, we've built something that is very, very, very robust. And we are comfortable that if CBD does anything for sleep, we will catch it with this study. It's essentially 3 arms, placebo, a 75 milligram dose, a 150 milligram dose. I haven't gone into too much detail here, but, nightly questionnaires, validated questionnaires every couple of weeks. The things that make our study different to the ones that have failed are essentially itemized here. So we're using the highest dose possible, 150 milligrams per day. For whatever reason, some of the other guys in the space are not using 150 milligrams per day. They're using smaller doses. So we're doing the maximum dose, and that's before you factor into any increase in absorption our product may have. We have, significantly higher patient numbers. So we've got nearly double the patient numbers of a bunch of these other trials. And really, when you don't know what the effect size is going to be, or you expect the effect size to be relatively small, because make no mistake, CBD is not a sedative. It's not going to be temazepam. It's not going to be one of these things that knock you out. It's going to have a much more holistic sort of subtle effect on sleep than that. When you are unsure of your effect size, you go hard on the patients. And so we have 540 patients. And this is one of the major cost drivers of our study compared to the others. We have much higher insomnia scores than the other guys. So the way insomnia severity is scored, so you fill out a questionnaire and you'll get a score out of, I'm going to get this wrong, it's about 27. If you score 1 to 7, you don't have insomnia. If you score 8 to 14, you've got mild. If you're 15 to 20 something, you're moderate. And above that is severe insomnia. So a lot of the other guys had inclusion scores of 8. Now, if they'd looked through the last approved FDA medications and looked at the placebo response for insomnia studies, the placebo response alone reduces the insomnia score by about 7. So if you start on a trial with a score of 8 and the placebo effect reduces your score by 7, you have no room left to see any difference between the drug and the control placebo group. So our people are all coming in with a minimum score of 15 to give us the extra scope to see a change. We have a longer dosing period, so we're dosing for 8 weeks instead of 4. Very importantly, we have an interim analysis. So after about 300 patients, statisticians will look at the data to date and they will do a powering calculation to say, look, based on what we're seeing here, you need another X number of patients to really tick off your statistical significance and hit the p-value, which is invaluable. And the other piece about that is it will have a futility assessment. So a futility assessment will say, this is the best design study in the world, but even then, CBD is not working for sleep. You should stop now, and you should save the money on dosing another couple of hundred patients. So so with that interim analysis is going to be pivotal for our trial. And then lastly, which I haven't included here because it will defeat the entire purpose of putting it here, we have mechanisms to limit the damage of the placebo effect. And that is another major cost driver for us, because the patient numbers combined with these methods are really what the bulk of the study costs are. And so just the timelines, I guess, moving forward for this program. I mean, obviously this is reliant on, getting the required amount of cash. The first piece is this manufacturing that you heard me talk about. It's a key piece of any submission. You could have the best phase 3 trial in the world, but if you can't manufacture the product, you've got no product, and it will never go through a regulatory agency. So we actually have additional contract manufacturers on board now. So we last year were looking at 3 separate manufacturers, Catalent and 2 others. We are about to put down the registration batches on formal stability. So we have the early batches going on, but we need now the registration batches that go into the regulatory submission to say 2-year shelf life. So they're about to go down. They'll go down in the next month or so, a couple of months. And then we'll complete the manufacturing dossier for the submission, and that'll be ready. That'll be ready to go as soon as the stuff comes off stability next year. In the meantime, we finalized the study design. We got all the vendors involved. We've got all the clinical trial sites engaged. Ethics approval is done. The clinical supply is just waiting for us to push the button on manufacturing, and that'll be churned out overseas. And then, as we said, we're hoping interim analysis before the end of the year, which will obviously be a big ticket item. And then with that in mind, we'd be hoping, everything going well, to submit to the TGA next year. But in the meantime, we'll continue to discuss with potential partners. And so the sleep program, as I say, the overarching focus, it is a near-term huge inflection and re-rate point for the company, but we will be maximizing value from the product along the way. And so how does that look? Well, there's really a number of different ways. So we will focus on doing the phase 3 trial, but while we're doing that and it's unfolding, we'll be looking to be licensing the CBD product for different territories. So each country at the moment is kind of its own island, and you can license the product individually into different territories. Now, as the product sort of passes phase 3 and goes to TGA approval, I mean, if we held as long as TGA approval, then the licensing discussions that we're having are not for a development product. They are a finished pharmaceutical. And so, they are multiplied by 10 or whatever it is. That's a much different licensing discussion. Now, in addition to the pharmaceutical space, we can obviously be looking at the unregistered medicinal cannabis, consumer CBD, wellness, recreational, these kind of things as well overseas. And it can go into there almost immediately once the manufacturing's up online. And also we can do by different indications. So not just sleep, but anxiety and pain and all these other kind of things. And so those of you that have been shareholders for a while, you'll obviously know that we used to develop a whole, pipeline of products in parallel. Now we've got this one product that we can develop that can turn into its own pipeline. And so this is already unfolding. So we've already done 2 deals in the space. The development of both of these is probably taking a bit longer than I would like. But we licensed the capsule to a US company. They're now called Perland, but they were Medterra and Medterra Pharma. Medterra, one of the more profitable CBD consumer companies in the US. They wanted to get into pharma. They've licensed our product for osteoarthritis. So they'll pay for all the development, all the clinical trials of our product in an osteoarthritis indication. Now, in the event that they fail, then they fail at their cost. It costs us nothing. In the event that they win and they succeed, then we obviously get a commercial return on an indication that we didn't have the resources to pursue ourselves. Likewise, we've put a brief toe in the water in the US recreational space. This is a huge market with products that don't work that well, no differentiation. And we've done a small deal with a company called Team SAS. They're looking at making a distillate. Again, they've been working through formulation things at their end, but independent of them, we've been using what we know about TPM and dosage forms and gummies. and we've been building TPM THC gummies locally, and they work fast and they work strong and they work long. They really do much better than you know, a normal sort of edible. Now, we're obviously thinking about this from the pharma side. You know, under the medicinal cannabis space, maybe immediately neuropathic pain, maybe anxiety, things that your rapid onset is good for. But we will obviously exploit them shamelessly in the US recreational cannabis space as well through partnership. And just really quickly again, I mean, I guess the reason I've got this kind of stuff is we are all focused on the phase 3, but for the shareholders to know that there is this whole portfolio of value still underneath it. So we've got all of these differentiated cannabinoid products already. So although these are listed as CBD, so we've got the CBD capsule for sleep. We're talking to a couple of people already about different indications. We've licensed it to Perlin for arthritis. We've got the topical CBD gel, which I haven't spoken all about in this, which we did the phase 2 study last year. And we are now writing the protocol for a quite large phase 2 CBD study, which we will do again with the Lambert. And it has applications for dermatology, the edibles. But on top of all of this, we have taken CBD out of all of these products. We've replaced it with THC. We've replaced it with CBC, CBG, CBN, the whole portfolio of sort of minor cannabinoids. They're all already down on stability, looking good. We've already tested them for topical and transdermal absorption and solubility. And essentially, we'll multiply this portfolio by 3 or 4 so that we've got products to offer anyone overseas and locally that has an interest in differentiated cannabinoid formulations using the sort of more minor cannabinoids. And the piece that we haven't really kind of accumulated until I sort of put it in the slide was that this year there will be 7 different clinical trials afoot that are testing TPM differentiated products. Now we're paying for one of them at the moment. We'll probably contribute to a couple of others, but we're paying for sleep. Perland in the US are paying for osteoarthritis. The Lambert, so for those of you who don't know the Lambert are Australia's key opinion leaders in cannabinoid research. We did our phase 2 with them last year. They like us, we like them. We both talk science, we talk data, we talk evidence. They've seen our data, they like the products. And so they are going to do 2 internal Lambert clinical trials this year using our CBD soft gel capsule for 2 separate indications. So just to nail that down, our CBD product with increased absorption is in 4 different indications this year. I only need it to work in 1 for it to be a huge commercial win. And then beyond that, we have osteoarthritis study, a much larger one with topical CBD. And with the Lambert, we'll do one with topical CBG because they have some data they quite like about CBG and arthritis. And then Perrigo, who are a big American consumer packaged good company, they've licensed our topical ibuprofen gel for pain. So they'll be doing clinical trials this year using that formulation. Now, they're targeting a US registration. There is no topical ibuprofen currently registered with the FDA. So this would be the first in the US if it was successful. And so you've heard me talk about the Perrigo arrangement. That'll take the majority of this year. The next one is that we do have a partnership afoot with another US company, Athenex. They're an injectables company. They really like what TPM can do for poorly soluble drugs in an injectable format. We've looked at a number of different places to start, but ultimately they took our vitamin K to the FDA in a pre-IND, specifically to kind of get a feel from the FDA as to how much development work was required, especially on the clinical front, and also get the FDA's early kind of opinion on what they think of our novel excipient in an injectable dosage format. So we'll hear back from the FDA and then discuss with Athenex what the path forward again is. But again, in the event they take it forward, they're going to pay for everything. And so these are the real value drivers for the company. I mean, we all know the global markets right now are awful. Everyone's share price and market cap over the last 6 months has taken a hammering, and we are absolutely no different. And so But our major path forward is this phase 3 clinical trial using the CBD capsule. Irrespective of the global markets, a phase 3 clinical trial is any biotech company's huge re-rate point. If you can get a successful phase 3 clinical trial away, then your market cap increases significantly. On the biotech side in Australia, we've got a couple of examples. So, I mean, they're different indications, they're different drugs, but like us, they're biotech pursuing pharmaceutical registration. Opthea's $350 million market cap, they're midway through phase 3. Paradigm's $400 million, they're midway through phase 3 for osteoarthritis. Immutep's $250 million, they've just started a phase 2/3. So it's a significant time. And I guess the market has conspired against us in the context of raising a significant amount of capital. But in doing so, it has provided a huge opportunity for investors, because you are going to get, potential shares at a much cheaper price than I would ideally have liked. Now, behind the phase 3 INSOMNIA trial, we've got this phase 2 osteoarthritis study that will be undertaken this year as well. As I said, 5 additional clinical trials, all generating their own news, commercial partnering and licensing discussions around not just the cannabinoids, but other products and new cannabinoid products. So I have touched upon the edibles. Once we have really solid foundation around what they are and what they can be, we'll talk about those a bit more. And as we've sort of even announced in the last couple of months, new partnering and licensing discussions around traditional non-cannabinoid medicines. And so, look, this is the company snapshot. The $1.47 million cash in the bank at the end of last year is obviously the requirement for new capital to fund the phase 3. I mean, we very much, everyone would agree that, as a phase 3 trial continues, we would see firm gains in the market cap. It should be noted here, I guess, and it's one of the reasons we've gone out to this, done this raise in the form of an entitlement offer, that we have a large percentage of very loyal shareholders that hold sort of 40% of the company. We have 5,000 shareholders in total, and it really is the reason why we've kind of structured the raise as an entitlement offer. We did the small capital raise 2 years ago, just a sort of 5 million as a placement. We had really, it went away without a hitch. We had oversubscribed bids for 22 million. It's a different market now, but the overarching feedback that I had last time from shareholders was, we really wish you had have offered this deal to all of us, because, it was an attractive terms last time. New money got an attractive position in the company, and existing shareholders didn't have access to the same deal. So this is why we are coming to you now. We are giving you the deal first, and then whatever you don't want, we will place via shortfall. And so just the management and the board, you do know all of us. We think across both management and board, we are really well placed to deliver on the phase 3 clinical trial. And then in the event of a successful phase 3 clinical trial, deliver on licensing and really partnering the product for maximum value. And so really with that, the focus, I guess the final thing to talk about is the terms of the rights issue. As talked about, it's a non-renounceable entitlement offering to shareholders to start. It is specifically to fund this phase 3 clinical trial. As I've already touched upon, we've gone to you first to give you the first offer. Take what you want. If you are unwilling to invest at this point in time, we completely understand, given the global markets, and your support is appreciated for all the years. But as I've said, the global markets, because they are so awful, they have really given you an opportunity to come in at a very good price with very good attractive options. And when the global markets rebound back, we hope that you have got a position that you're comfortable with and you can see the value of those returns. And so it's a one-to-one offer on a pro rata basis. As I said, we're aiming for just over $11 million to fund the trial. It's 0.6 per share, 0.6 cents per share, but we're further incentivized with attaching options. So 3 attaching options for every 2 new shares at an exercise price of 1.2 cents. Eligible shareholders, should you like the story, have the opportunity to bid for further shares. And as I've mentioned, once you've all picked across what you want, we will then place the shortfall with new money. And so far as the use of funds, the manufacturing piece that I talked about will cost about 1.3 million. That's not just the manufacturing of the phase 3 clinical trial. That's the completion of the registration batches and all of those that work along the way that builds the manufacturing piece of a future TGA and FDA submission dossier. The trial itself, 9.3 million of the 11 will go towards that. The trial itself will actually cost about 12, so it will cost a bit more, but we'll talk about that in a second. The main study cost, as I said, is really the number of patient numbers that we have and the things that we have in the study to address the placebo response. Now, what the recent failures have done for us is 100% validated the approach that we cannot cut corners on the trial. We can't have fewer patient numbers. We can't use less assessment techniques. We have to go all in, and we have to pay for a trial that gives us the best chance of success. If it succeeds, no one will care at the end of the day that it cost $12 million. But $12 million is what it's going to cost to do it properly to give us the best chance of succeeding. And then the cost of the offer itself, so broker fees, computer share fees, all the rest, it's sickening how quickly it adds up. It really is. But, there's, 350K of fees associated with it. Now, just quickly on the additional funds. So we already have advanced findings with Oz Industry about the conduct of this study and specifically the overseas spend. So the entire study will be eligible for the R&D tax credits. And so if we spend $11 million, we will get about $5 million back. And so with a lot of these clever mechanisms that are now available, you can get advancements on those. So there are a few firms that will say, okay, you're owed $5 million of R&D tax credit. We'll give it to you now as an upfront with a fee attached to it. So we can take 11 and we can make it be worth much more. The additional advantage of that is you get forward advances on the R&D and you still spend it in this calendar year, and then it qualifies, the additional spend qualifies for further R&D investment in the following year. So if we are fortunate enough to get away with the 11, it will take us to the end of the phase 3 trial. And so the risk section, we all know, we're a biotech, it's R&D, there are risks attached. There is the risk that the phase 3 trial will fail. Again, we have built a much better study than any of the others that are going around at the moment. But if CBD doesn't work for sleep, CBD doesn't work for sleep. We are very comfortable that we've built in a number of other secondaries and other endpoints that if CBD works for something else, we will likely catch it as well. And that's a whole separate conversation, but you understand the risk, you're investing in biotech. There is the financial risk that the company fails to get the money and fails. There's future capital needs. There's competition risk. So there are other companies looking at registering similar products or increasing bioavailability. We know those as well. We think there are very, very specific reasons why specifically our technology and our expertise makes us ideally suited at this specific time with these markets to make a real big splash. There is risks that our IP would fail, although we've got 14, 15 different patent families and 2 new ones coming on board. And there's risks around loss and theft of data. So that's me formally ticking off the formal risk pieces. I guess with that, Matt, I'll turn back to you to address any questions that might have popped up.
Excuse me. Thanks very much, Paul. We'll now move on to the Q&A session, as you've alluded to. As mentioned earlier, the questions are based on some sent through via email in advance, but some will be using the Q&A function within Zoom. So if you do have a question you'd like to submit, please feel free to submit it on your screen. Paul, the first question, which has actually come through a couple of times now, is what is the company's plan if the required funds cannot be raised?
Sure. So it will really be a conversation around how much is raised. So you've heard me talk about the interim analysis as an example. So whilst the study in its entirety is budgeted to cost about 12, to get to the interim analysis will cost about 8. And so if we were to get to the interim analysis, and the interim analysis, the statistical analysis said there is something to see here and you need more people, then we will have no problem getting further capital because of everyone else failing. There are really few of us out there. We'll have no problem getting additional capital if the interim analysis suggests that there is something to be seen with the trial. And it could even be in that scenario that the additional capital comes from Big Pharma. If we were not to get 8 and we would get less than 8, then we would obviously look at the magnitude of what we've got and how we would use that R&D advanced feature to make that amount of money go further. So again, to get to the interim analysis, so it might be that we get 6, but we use the advanced findings of the R&D to get us to 8. If we get less than that, the first thing that we'll do is tick off the manufacturing. So get the stuff down on stability, get it aging. And as I sort of say, I mean, we've got this shortfall mechanism. So the shareholders, you guys will put in what you can afford to put in. And then we really do have 3 months beyond that, if required, to use the brokers and go out through the funds and look at placing the shortfalls. So there's a number of mechanisms. There's a kind of tiered hierarchy of how we would spend the money, depending, I guess, on what we receive at the end of the day.
Thank you. And you might have almost half answered this with that, with the answer you just gave, but how much of the estimated trial cost is likely to be saved if the trial is terminated early following futility analysis?
Yeah, at the moment, we think about 4 million would be saved. So the phase 3 trial has a lot of heavy sunk costs up front. So, you know, database management and setup and all these other kind of things, they're kind of sunk costs. But where you save money is on the per patient cost. So obviously, if we don't dose 540 patients and we only dose 300, there's a significant cost to be had. And so we think the savings at this stage going to be about 4 million.
Right. The next question is, what is the company's plan if the full trial is conducted but does not meet its endpoints?
So look, the first thing would be to interrogate the secondary outcomes. So as I say, we've basically built this study to also be an anxiety study. So the same endpoints that you would use for a phase 3 anxiety study, all the rest, and there are a couple of other endpoints in there. We would interrogate those. I mean, essentially, if our data suggested that we did everything within our power and this is an anxiety product, then we'd be having licensing discussions with Big Pharma. We'd be showing them all of this phase 3 clinical trials supporting the use for anxiety and see where that landed us. Beyond that, of course, we've got these other 5 clinical trials happening in the background. As I said, I can realistically make a win out of any of those succeeding. So where we hope to find ourselves at the end of the day, at the end of this year, is 7 trials essentially complete or nearing complete. And then we can look through all that data and see what options are our best options moving forward, which realistically will probably be multiples.
Thank you. And another one you've alluded to, but how much R&D rebate is likely on the trial costs?
So it's essentially 43.5% of whatever you spend. So if I spend 12, I'll get whatever the maths is, 5.5. I think it was 5.5 on an $11 million spend. So for 12, it's obviously a bit more. I should know that answer. I apologize.
Very good. We'll get the calculator out.
Yep.
The next question is, you might want to go back to slide 12 here just to help with the purpose of this one, Paul. But on slide 12, it states CBD has, quote, not been proven to work for insomnia. So how do we know our product works? It sounds as if our trials are assessing whether it does not cause serious side effects. What evidence is there, or how are tests proving it helps insomniacs sleep? And will it be for all insomnia, including, say, jet lag, or for very specific causes of insomnia?
Yeah, so anecdotally, which we hate in the pharma world, but anecdotally, CBD is being prescribed a lot all around the world for sleep. So a lot of people are currently taking CBD for sleep and they're comfortable that it works for them. Obviously, where that is a weakness is that they are very susceptible to the placebo effect. So on the first pass, you've got a lot of data out there in the public domain that people are prescribing CBD and they're comfortable it works. There are some publications of smaller phase 2 clinical trials, really unpowered studies that are looking at the effect of CBD in sleep. There are some signals to be seen there, but all of those ones sort of say we need larger studies to really tease this out. The third point that no one really kind of talks about is that one of the side effects of Epidiolex is sleepiness. So if you pull the Epidiolex label and look at the side effects from their big clinical trials, somnolence is one of their side effects that I think affects 20% of the participants. So there is a signal there for sleep. We won't be teasing out specific forms of insomnia, being an OTC medication. It'll essentially be, you know, if you go into a chemist and you report that you can't sleep, you'll be able to get the product. But our trials will give you a signal of whether it's the people that have trouble falling asleep or whether the guys that, you know, wake up in the middle of the night, which sort of patient population it works for best.
Thank you. The next question is, often medications designed for one condition prove useful for others. Is that likely to apply for this product, for example, in pain?
Yeah, so potentially, I mean, on our trial alone, as we sort of said, we're looking at sleep, we're looking at anxiety, a number of people looking at anxiety. CBD has already been proven to work or in animal models for arthritis and the pain associated with arthritis. There will be a whole raft of indications that CBD is proven to work for over time, just as there will be a whole lot of indications proven that it doesn't work for in placebo-controlled conditions. Where we sit is that agnostic of which indications work or don't, it will realistically be a story of how much drug can you get on board to see those effects, and our products and our formulations therefore can be pitched at all of them.
Excellent. The next question is Avecho's intellectual property safe from hackers, given what's happened to so many major companies over time?
Yes. So not just in the context of the patent protection that we actually have, we are the only ones that make TPM. So we manufacture it ourselves through that wall. We're the only ones that manufacture it. There's a bit of nuance and know-how in actually making it at a consistent quality with a good yield. So we control the manufacturing in addition to the patents, in addition to any commercial relationship we have with anyone else. Matt, I'm going to have to run because I have a 3 o'clock presentation with AusBiz. So everyone needs to log in at 3 o'clock to AusBiz.
No problem. There's one further question we can take offline.
Yeah, please put it on the portal, guys. We've set up this portal so you can have live Q&A. I'll try and answer all the questions I have through that portal. But otherwise, everyone, thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Thanks, Paul, and thanks to everyone for joining. We'll leave it at that.